It was Good Riddance, No Use for a Name, and maybe Mad Caddies. But there was one particular show that I remember I could tell people were like flipping us off and throwing things, and the anxiety and frustration of feeling like we have people that like what we're doing. We were proud to be a band on a label where we sounded different. Like I felt like that was something that we had going for us, but that sometimes you didn't know what that was going to bring.
Welcome everyone to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we begin, Robert J. Heiner, we are all pulling for you and wish you nothing but love and all of the best right now for the shit you're going through. Just wanted to give you a shout out because you're one of my brothers and I love you to death, man. So I just wanted you to know that. Bracket is an American rock band from Forestville, California, formed in 1992. They have issued numerous albums, EPs, and singles since its inception, including many releases for Caroline Records and Fat Records. Their sound could most easily be described as power punk-influenced punk rock with a continued focus on vocal harmonies. Bracket emerged during the pop-punk resurgence of the early 1990s and released its first two albums, 924 Forestville St in 94 and Four Wheel Vibe in 95 on Caroline Records. Following a staff shakeup, the label dropped the group and canceled the release of its third album, Like You Know, in 96. Bracket's next two albums, Novelty Forever and When All Else Fails, were put out by Fat Records, who had previously issued 7-inch vinyl for the band. They released Live in a Dive in 2002 on Fat, which gathered some of the band's best-known material into one performance. Requiem came out in 2006, released by Takeover Records, and they have a 70-minute album consisting of one song, the 28th installment of their Warren Songs series. The band recorded nearly 100 short fragments of a song with the intention of piecing them together to create the 70-minute Warren Song Part 28. Bracket completed work on their 9th studio album, Too Old to Die Young, in late 2018, which came out on Fat in 2019. First time I heard about Bracket was in like the late 90s when Josh from Humble Beginnings would talk about that. It was one of his favorite bands because he had also heard that it was one of Fat Mike's favorite bands, or was like Fat Mike's favorite band at that time. And on my journey to find some new people to reach out to, I was like, I should definitely talk to these guys just to find out the whole history, because they had like kind of a rough run being on Fat Records, and I wanted to kind of dig into that some more. And Angelo opens up the doors on that, which is pretty cool and interesting to hear. So I got him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. Henhouse Brewing, Bracket starting off as a cover band, being one of Fat Mike's favorite bands, how they were perceived by Fat Wreck crowds, their album Requiem, recording Live in a Dive, their split with Humble Beginnings, questions that Josh Humble submitted, their 70-minute song, Beavis and Butthead, their latest release on Fat, and a ton more. If you want to support the podcast, you can just go over to patreon.com and sign up for $1 a month, or you can also go to thiswasthescene.com, and there's a purple button that says donate. You could just do a one-time donation through Venmo and send whatever. It just helps keep this thing going. It keeps me motivated to keep doing this, besides the interviews, which I absolutely love, just monetary-wise. It's very helpful to help pay for, I guess, a beer here and there from doing all this work. So, yeah, that'd be great if you could help out that way. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Why is 9 o'clock the best time? Like, what's your job? Because like last week you had a pop-up meeting, so what do you do?
I'm in Sonoma County in the Bay Area-ish, and I work for a local brewery, and I sell beer. I don't serve beer, but I sell it. I sell our product into bars and restaurants and stores and stuff. It was a big career change. I worked with kids from like the time, I think I was like a year or two out of high school, and I started working at an after school program. I did that for 20 years and then was like, well, I want to do something else. This brewery in Santa Rosa called Henhouse Brewing makes my favorite beer. I wonder if they're hiring. So I suddenly found myself in sales, which I never saw, like when I turned 40. Yeah, I'm old.
I'm 43, so I don't want to hear that bullshit.
You know what? I'm 43 too. But I started like eyeing my career change at 40. I was like, it's now or never.
You know, man, I've been working for myself for like 18 years, which I love, and I definitely don't want to work for someone else. But I've been hitting this whole thing recently where I'm like, am I doing what I love still? It's funny. I guess maybe it's just the age thing, or like the midlife or so crisis where you kind of just like, do I want to do another X amount of years like this?
I know. Yeah, it's funny because like I'm sure everybody feels like it's not that cliched to think like I'm not someone that's really just having a midlife crisis. I'm not like the average early 40s person, but I'm sure that most of the time that's what it is. And so maybe that's just okay to kind of check yourself and make sure that you're as happy doing what you're doing as you could be. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, working with children was like a very rewarding and also, kind of a draining profession. And it got really, I guess, even harder during the early days of the pandemic. But all of that aside, it's probably because I was like 40 and is this what I'm going to do until I retire? That was a scary thought. So it feels like you're like rebooting if you reevaluate what you want to do. Both careers have offered up enough flexibility that I get to do other things that I am passionate about. Obviously having a family and stuff, but music.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, it's perfect. Actually, I was going to give you a heads up on your website because I was checking it out because I love beer. I'm a huge IPA. I've been like into hazy IPAs for so long, probably like every other fucking person in the world.
Right.
But on your website in the top, you have a thank you for shopping. Please note the last day for Christmas orders will be Thursday, December 15th. You guys might want to
Oh, shit. Really?
Yeah, it's in the merch section.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We need to get on that. It's a pretty new, slick little website they got going, but
it's a dope site.
Like everybody else, a lot of the correspondence with the stuff that we do is more social media based. Yeah, we got to check that merch section out.
Yeah. Wow. 31,000 followers. You guys are not fucking around. This is great.
Yeah. No, it's really fantastic beer and an awesome company. Josh Staples, I don't know if you've ever heard of Velveteen. He does all the artwork like the majority of the artwork for all the branding, all the can art and stuff. He's good friends with one of the founders. That guy is way too talented.
I think that's a key thing is having a killer artist. There's a brewery out in Asheville out here called Burial. Their whole theme is like this like metal, creepy shit like that, and it's fucking awesome. And their beer is ridiculously good. But the whole branding is perfect. So I think like when a brewery really taps into a theme and just goes after it, but it has to have a really good artist to all the cans and everything that surrounds it, makes it look just like way bigger. Especially if the beer itself kicks ass, then that's just like a nice little good coat of paint on the outside. Oh,
for sure. Yeah, Henhouse definitely went with a theme and stuck with it, and it's a lot of fun to sell their beer and drink it.
Yeah, that's a nice perk. You guys came up because I've been thinking about you guys for a while, and we're going to talk about this later. But there's this band called Humble Beginnings. You guys did a split with them, I believe, before you got in the band, because you got in the band, you said around 99, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to find proof of when it was exactly, and I've been doing this for years, and no one quite remembers. But I think it was either really late 98 or 99. But yeah, it was just after. Let's see, Novelty Forever was the studio album that was out a year or two before I was in the band. Like that was the last studio album with the former guitarist. Brackett was kind of not on hiatus, but they were kind of for a little bit. They were kind of like not sure what they were going to do because their guitarist just left without a lot. I guess there wasn't a lot of communication, and so that period of time, like from them sort of taking a pause to figure out what to do, and then how I became involved was, it was a period of at least a few months before it was like, okay, officially Angelo is in the band.
So two things: why did Larry leave, and were you a fan of the band prior to joining?
Okay. Yes, I was a fan of the band. In fact, Marty, who is the primary songwriter, lead guitarist, lead vocalist, he is my older cousin. We grew up together. He was like the cool older cousin that could play guitar very well. And I always looked up to him and wanted to be like him and play music. And then when his childhood friends, who I knew not closely, but I knew of them, Zach and Ray and Larry, just from them hanging around their house growing up and stuff. When suddenly there was like this pivot where they were a real band, like Not that they weren't before, but so when I was a kid, they were a mostly cover band called High Output, and they did like, I don't know, like classic rock covers and stuff. And I thought that was cool when I was like 5 or 6 or whatever. And then in the early 90s, they got into punk. I don't know. I don't want to speak exactly for the creative history before I was in the band, but so I'm like 9 years younger than my cousin Marty, and they're all around the same age as each other. At some point in like the early 90s, I guess, I remember him bringing, like, I saw him at some point and he brought I can't remember if it was the 7-inch, their like demo, or if it was the cassette version of it. But basically they recorded a demo. I think there were like 4 songs. It's called the Giant Midget EP.
Oh, jeez.
And I know.
That wouldn't work well these days.
It's such a different time.
Yeah.
And then I was just sort of becoming acquainted with punk rock music. And then suddenly my cool older cousin Marty and his friends were playing this really unique poppy punk music that I don't think Dookie had taken off quite yet. So it was like just before the masses had really heard a style of music that fell into that category. Basically, it was such a different time. It's hard to rewind and really remember exactly. But anyway, it was very exciting and definitely like a musical awakening for myself. My point being, I was a very early Bracket fan. Part of it was that it was, people that I knew as a kid and looked up to, but also they always came across as having a really unique sound. As I got older and got more into music, I followed them as much as I could. Whenever they were touring a ton, like in the early to mid 90s, and whenever they'd come back to Sonoma County to play a show, I would always go, and it was very exciting to see that band from the beginning.
When they changed into like the punk sound or evolved in the punk sound, were you a little disappointed that they weren't doing covers anymore?
Oh no, because it's kind of a blur. But I remember being like a really little kid and thinking, oh, that's cool. They're playing like, I don't know, I can't even remember, like Johnny Winter covers and like probably AC/DC, whatever. And I was too young to even like. It was just cool that they were playing music in their backyard, for the family and friends. Fast forward to quite a bit later. No, it was like, wow, it's the weirdest thing to say, but I think that hearing Bracket, like early Bracket, was one of the things that really got me into punk rock. Because it was like, oh, my cousin listens to this kind of music. He's playing this music now. What influenced that? And then I got into whatever, like I can't even think of Green Day, of course, but like the Fastbacks, NoFX. Those are 2 very different bands from very different scenes. But some of that earlier like more melodic punk in the early 90s that a lot of bands started playing was new to me and very exciting. No, I loved it. Everything Bracket was doing in those first couple of albums, I was eating up. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is the type of music I want to play. I had no idea that I would get the opportunity to play it with them, but yeah, that was a really long answer to the question of whether or not I was a fan of the band. Yes, absolutely. And then what happened with their guitarist?
Yeah, how did Larry leave the band? And then when he did that, were you like, oh, fuck yeah?
So at that time they were like at the height of their touring. I didn't see Marty very much for at least a year or 2. Like they were touring a lot, going all over the place. At one point, I don't know the details, so I don't really want to speak on it, and it could be sensitive anyway. But at one point, Larry kind of like, I think they were towards the end of a tour. I could be wrong. He didn't come home. Like I think he met somebody. And it was not like, I'm staying here, I'm leaving the band, but it was just a little bit of like, Larry didn't come home from the tour. He's stayed in wherever it was, Washington or something. So I think it wasn't clear, like, is he just like taking a break? Is he going to come back? Is he staying with this person that he met? Like, I don't know. And I probably, like I said, I don't want to insinuate that I know the details. But what happened was they came home, other than Larry, from a tour. I don't know the exact like period of time that it took, but I ran into Marty. Like at that point, we both lived in a similar area in Sonoma County. Hadn't seen Marty for a while. oddly enough, we ran into each other at the gym, which is just funny because neither of us are like health nuts or extreme weightlifters or anything, or even moderate weightlifters. But at that point, obviously, we both separately found ourselves trying to join a gym for whatever reason, and we ran into each other. And I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he just kind of casually said, "Hey, I know you. I know you know how to play a lot of our songs. I actually used to. I had a 4-track like tape, a 4-track recorder thing at home. I lived with my parents. Like I was in high school or just out of high school, I guess. I never played with other people, but I used to record myself playing things. Like I had a drum machine, and I would try to record covers of stuff that I liked. So I remember recording some Bracket songs just for fun, like just because I liked doing it and I didn't know what to do with that creative energy or whatever. I think I recorded a tape of, I played some Mr. T Experience song and a couple of Bracket songs. At some point, Marty got a hold of the tape. I kind of wanted him to hear, but I was kind of embarrassed too. But anyway, so he referenced that. He's like, I know you know how to play a couple of our songs. Larry's not playing with us right now. Would you like to come and see how it goes? So it was like the best experience at the gym I've ever had.
It's like your first time going in forever.
And I'm like, fuck the gym. I'm going to join a band.
Yeah.
And I've stuck with that motto ever since. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, it was so out of nowhere. I had no idea that there was any friction, within the band or anything. He was just sort of tentative, and he knew that I'd never played with other people. And at that point, I think I was like 18, and I just liked playing their songs. I knew how to play most of their songs just because it was like I said, like these guys that I knew, and my cousin was in this band that I really liked. And so I really looked up to them and liked playing their music just for myself, I guess. To get the opportunity to be in a room with them and play was surreal at that point, and really like kind of intimidating, but it was a fun experience, and it somehow all worked out.
I know, because you guys are still playing now, or still putting things out now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was like, I don't know, probably 23 or 24 years ago. And we can get into that whenever you're curious, but we don't play out very often, as you may be able to tell from looking at our pretty slow-moving social media accounts. But and there's definitely lulls between albums, but we have continued to do stuff ever since. We've had a lot of ups and downs and adventures. Not really like getting out in the world adventures, but just things that we were trying to pull off that worked and things that didn't. And so there's been a lot that we've done in the last couple of decades.
Yeah, because I do want to talk about the music video you guys put out with the stop animation later on, because I think I think it's great. So when you get on the label, they've already put out Novelty Forever on Fat Records, and then you get in on When All Else Fails and do that record?
Yeah, there's two things that we recorded before we set out to record that album. The When All Else Fails songs were definitely like, once they made sure I could, play through the set, that, or at least the batch of songs that we would rotate through the sets, Marty definitely had most or all of the songs, at least in a formative stage, for When All Else Fails when I first started playing with them. So we definitely worked on those. And I think we recorded two things before that, which was, one was the, I think I mentioned this to you in the email or whatever, that Short Music for Short People, the Fat Records comp, where Mike had everybody either submit a song that they already had that was 30 seconds or less, or record it. So I'm like 99% sure my first experience recording with Bracket was getting to go to Motor Studios and have Ryan Green and Adam Kramer record a song with us. So we did that. I think it's Warren's song part 8, the 30-second song that ended up on that comp. That was the first thing I got to do with Bracket. And then we did, we recorded a Ramones cover for Ramones, like, what is that called? Tribute album, I guess. And we did that at Prairie Sun Studios in Cotati, California.
Actually, I just interviewed Ryan Green, and I put it out a couple weeks ago, and he was just dissecting albums he put out and just talked about his whole method about him recording. And he said he really just wanted to get an emotion out of a band, and he would really like push them to do it the best they can? Like, what do you remember from recording with them?
Okay, so I remember, first of all, like I was very
Green.
green is the word. Yeah. It was exciting and a little bit intimidating, and like just like I would love to relive that time, because I feel like it happened so fast, and it was so much like, holy shit, I'm at Motor Studios right now. I just joined Bracket like 6 months ago. It was very exciting and a little intimidating. And I literally never, other than the 30-second song, I had never been in a real recording studio. I was making tapes in my bedroom. So he was very like structured and professional, and very much, he was a little bit like, I don't know if it was me or a combination, but he was a little, not intimidating, but like, he would be like, no, do that again. Like, it was like, very workman-like, I guess.
Yeah, he said that. He'd be like, nope, do it again. Nope, do it again. Do it again.
And I feel like I remember, yeah, generally it was a fun experience. It was also fun working with his assistant engineer, Adam Kramer. I remember one night there was like a little, I guess it became the intro to a song called Happy Song on When All Else Fails. We wanted to do something kind of like sonically weird, like with whatever. I think Ryan left for the day, and we got Adam involved in helping us mess around with the drum machine and stuff. So that was kind of fun to just do something weird to tack onto a song. And then Mike came into the studio at one point and wanted to co-write one of the songs, which was No Brainer.
Oh, wow.
That was fun too.
I feel like this is such an intimidating time period because you haven't recorded. Have you ever played live before this?
Yeah. So, I mean, not before I joined the...
Yeah, before the band.
No. Yeah. So no, it was a few months in, or a couple months in, maybe. I think I remember playing my first show with them. And yeah, it was like this combination of wanting to feel confident enough for it to be fun for people to watch, but I was intimidated. It was fun and exciting, and kind of like, oh shit, I have to act like I'm part of this band that is already established. But no, I mean, it was all a lot of fun. Definitely going to record at that studio, having Fat Mike come in there, who I was like, had idolized for at least a few years prior to that, was fun and exciting and intimidating too.
I remember this from 20-something years ago. In an interview, or a friend of mine said that he said Bracket was one of his favorite bands. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah, I read an interview or two where he said that, and this was like pre me being in the band and just thinking like, oh, cool, this guy that is the singer in a band that I really likes my cousin's band, No, I have definitely heard that on and off throughout the years, and in fact, I think occasionally he still tells people that, because I just talked to somebody who was around him recently, and he was mentioning, I doubt he's saying we're his favorite band currently, but at one point we held a special place in his heart, and he did so much for our band, and so we're eternally grateful for that.
Did you guys find when that came out that more kids were showing up at your shows based on that statement?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I would think that's a good endorsement. There's no way it would have hurt that.
Well, you were also on Fat Records at the same time, so that was definitely helping.
For sure, yeah. And, around that time, like the late 90s, early 2000 time, even at that point, we weren't doing huge tours. Basically, once I joined the band kind of shifted a little bit. And I swear it's not my fault. It was like it was like the band was kind of, each of them were reassessing maybe a little bit like what they wanted to do, and slowing down a little bit was probably something that was going to naturally happen anyway. And when I joined the band, that was fine with me too. I wasn't like pushing them to like, come on, I want to do all these tours that you guys did. But when we did do things in that period of time, there was a lot of like little short runs with other Fat bands, and or hopping onto the Fat tours when they would come a little closer to us. So it was not like a huge time off of work and whatever. That was always fun. And also with that sometimes came, I can't think of a better or a less cliched thing to say, but kind of a double-edged sword sometimes playing those Fat shows, because the bands were always really nice. There was always lots of mutual respect with these different bands that we would play with from the label. And yet sometimes the fan base of those bands were not as, I don't know, not as into what we sounded like. So it was always kind of like, is this sea of Good Riddance fans going to want to hear these mid-tempo, poppy, 3-part harmony songs? And sometimes they didn't.
I was going to ask that because it was pretty known that you guys didn't have that Fat Record sound, because the Fat Record sound back then, now it doesn't sound like the old school Fat Record sound. It's not like that, do that, do that, do that. And I think I was going to ask if that worked against you, because I remember back then when someone played me your guys' stuff, I was like, this doesn't sound anything like a Fat band. And I would like, so now I'm thinking back, I'm like, that must have had some either positive or negative effect on you. It sounds like it was negative.
Yeah, I mean, okay, the way I would put it is that long term, it was a positive effect, because I think we did make some lasting impressions on people that appreciated what we were doing, and, you know, still somehow follow us to this day, which is crazy because we're just like so not active. But also during that time, it was, you know, there were positive things from that. There were people that were like very excited to hear a band that sounded different. But I also think that that time compared to now was there was a lot more like, there was a lot less open-mindedness in that scene. I mean, from what I experienced, it felt like every show, if we were playing with any like punk, I can't think of what I'm trying to say, but like, I mean, I guess I don't want to keep picking on the fat bands that we play with, but a lot of times there we would be worried, like, how are we going to be received? Because, you know, we would play with, and we'd also overthink that kind of stuff too. So part of that is our fault. It's not like we're running around in the audience asking people if they are okay with us playing slower. It was just a general feeling like, ooh, do these people look like they're having a good time? But I do remember playing, I think it was one of those Fat tours, and we played a few shows in a row, like kind of hopped along, like I said, when they were in California. And I think it was Good Riddance and No Use for a Name and maybe Mad Caddies. I don't know. There were like 2 or 3 different ones throughout the years that were like similar, some overlapping bands. But there was one particular show that I remember I could tell people were like flipping us off and throwing things. And yeah, so the anxiety and frustration of feeling like we have people that like what we're doing. We were proud to be a band on a label where we sounded different. Like I felt like that was something that we had going for us, but that sometimes you didn't know what that was going to bring. And it was always kind of hard to tell, like, what's the best bill for us to be on? You know, what kind of bands should we be playing with so that the people we're playing to are interested in seeing us? It sounds sad now, but it was mostly good. We played a lot of fun shows.
Well, I'm looking at your Discogs, and it's like 2000 Fat Records, 2002 Fat Records, then you're on Takeover Records 2006, 2014 High Output, Head to Wall in 2016, then 2019 you're back on Fat. So like when you get on, you start the second album that gets on Fat, and then you do another one on Fat, which was Live in a Dive, so that's really not like a studio album. That's you at a venue. When you guys went to Takeover, was there like a conversation? You're going, okay, we got to get out of this Fat thing because it's really working against us.
You would think, but no, that's not it. You know, for all the anxiety that we had about being the band on Fat that didn't play fast and that sometimes had unexpected reactions from crowds, most of the time that we played with those bands or other punk bands, they were fun experiences, and it was rewarding to get out there and have people know your songs. I think that When All Else Fails was pretty well received. And I remember playing shows after that was released where people were like, into them and knew the songs. And even when we were playing with other bands that may have a crowd that wants something a little more aggressive. Honestly, I think that if we had written the rest of the history of Bracket, we probably just, at the very least, just for ease and like stability, we would have just stayed with Fat Records. And that's kind of what we expected, knowing that Mike liked our band and stuff. But what happened was we turned down a few tour offers just for whatever reason. Either we didn't want to do it, or we all were getting jobs that had a little more commitments, or even starting families. We did the live album with Fat. Around that time, we kind of made the plan that this was sort of spearheaded by Marty, that we were going to build a recording studio and learn to do that and record our own music. Not because it was terrible not as a reaction to any experiences that we had in the past, but the idea of getting to learn how to do that was something that Marty really wanted to do, and we were on board for that. So we knew that it was going to be kind of like a little bit of space between albums because, first of all, I think that we were feeling like we would like to push into some other musical directions. Never to just say like we don't play punk rock anymore, but maybe get to flesh out some of the things that we wanted to do that were harder to do in a short time period in a studio that was sort of being watched over by people that had sort of a vested, is that the right word? Interest.
Okay.
Like I think that whether it was spoken or not, I think that we felt like there was probably some expectation of what direction we should go in. It was never like, okay, you guys have to have at least half of your songs have to be this fast, or it was nothing like that. And maybe it was more just feelings that we got, but it felt like there was kind of an expectation that we should continue in the same direction, like that When All Else Fails was.
When you were in the recording studios, you felt that you were being kind of guided in that direction. So when you got
yeah, it was never like it wasn't like heavy-handed or anything, and it was really just suggested. But I think that we got the feeling that the more up-tempo stuff was more sought after. And not that we wanted to just play a bunch of slow stuff, but the idea of getting to be left alone and learn how to do it ourselves and see what we came up with was exciting. Marty's dad had some property, like some apple orchards in Sebastopol, which is in this kind of the same area where we all grew up. And there was an old trailer that was on his property. It was just an abandoned old, like it kind of looked creepy. It's not something you'd want to just settle down and live in. But what we basically did as a band, like with all our free band time, among working jobs and having families, was we'd get together, I think like 2 or 3 nights a week after work. We gutted the trailer, like completely tore out all this, like whatever. We like ripped the walls off and rebuilt it from the inside out. We built a recording studio. Marty invested a bunch of money into buying equipment, and we really didn't play any shows. We didn't really like play much music together in that time period. And I think it might've been like a couple of years. It was right around the Live in a Dive time, like when that came out. Anyway, took quite a bit of time to just like semi-learn how to record. And I have to say it's a lot easier these days to make something sound decent without a lot of experience. And that period of time that we were doing this, there's been a lot of technological advances in recording in the last probably 10 or 15 years. At that point, there was a steep learning curve, but we were determined to come up with at least enough skill to attempt to record our own next record.
At that time as well, like this is 2002, you guys put out Live in a Dive, and then 2006, you guys put out Requiem on Takeover Records. So in that time, and this is when the scene, so it's like if you were strung out in the late, or Good Riddance in the late 90s, that was the sound that everyone was looking for. 2001 comes around and everything changes. How did you feel like you fit in that time period, like going into the early 2000s?
This sounds like I'm having a shitty attitude, but I really don't think we cared. I don't think we didn't bother to really stay in touch with what we thought was popular.
I don't think that's a shitty attitude at all. I think that's actually positive.
Well, sure. Like, I mean, I think that for whatever reason, we created our own bubble and just knew this is the direction that we want to go musically. We have no idea what people care about anymore. I mean, you can say we don't care what people like, but that's, on some level, that's not true, because obviously it's great if your first priority is to make music that makes you feel fulfilled, but it feels good when people appreciate what you do. No one is only doing it to please themselves. It does something to know that you're bringing joy or at least mild interest to other people. I don't know if it was just the fact that we listened to a lot of different music. Like, I don't think any of us at that time period were like waiting for, we were not staying on the cutting edge of punk rock. Definitely bands that we continued to follow, but we all listened to a lot of different music and wanted to see how that worked into whatever mold we had made for ourselves as a band, or the expectations that people had, even if they were different. Mike's expectations versus some of our fans that might have been more excited or open to hearing us kind of like flesh out or expand some of the more melodic aspects of our music. I guess what happened was, when we were taking that long period of time to build the studio and learn how to record, we just kind of turned inward and didn't worry too much about the outside world. Maybe that played a role in the fact that Requiem was not received well by what we thought was our record label. But to summarize, we got the studio built. Marty had a bunch of song ideas, and we spent quite a long time recording, sort of learning as we went. At that same time, our drummer, Ray, moved to Colorado, which is halfway across the country, which didn't stop us. It just kind of made things a little more complicated. What we did was, Marty had of anyone in the band, he had a very clear vision, or the clearest vision of what these songs should sound like. So much so that when we started recording the ideas for the songs, Marty played drums, and we recorded like scratch guitar and bass tracks, sent these bracket demos to Ray in Colorado for him to listen to. And not to say like, Ray, you better play this exactly like Marty's playing it, but it was enough to give Ray some structure to these songs that we had never played. We had never sat in a room together and played with each other. So it was a long process, which is why you see like a 4-year. Actually, looking back, I'm surprised it's only 4 years, but that is the case.
That's a long time though, man.
It's, I feel like it is. And then I realize it's been almost 4 years since we've released our last album. So maybe time is just weirder now.
That's true.
But yeah, it is. It was a long time for a band that wasn't just saying like, yeah, we'll do whatever we want to when we get around to it. We still felt like we were an active band. We were just not doing anything actively with anyone else in the world.
How did you treat the band leading up to that? It seems like it was the band kind of came second and everything else in your lives was first.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it was never like, all right, you guys, let's like just take a pause on this. Let's not do this anymore. It was just that we had a finite amount of free time. We were all okay using that time to get together to become construction workers for for a couple of years, knowing that it was all getting our ducks in a row or whatever to be able to start recording our own music. I'm surprised that we were as patient as we were to like see that through to actually recording that album. So we sent the basic demo tracks to Ray. He played along with them. He had some like practice, like an electronic drum set somewhere in his home in Colorado. And then at some point came out and we played them all together in the same room. And then we ended up recording. He flew out at some point. I don't know when, somewhere in those 4 years. We recorded all his drum tracks, and then we just spent a bunch of time layering the stuff on that we wanted to. Obviously, we experimented a lot more with vocal harmonies, which was something that Marty and I both were really excited about doing. The finished product, while, in retrospect, or even back then when it was happening, we knew that it didn't sound like it came from an expensive recording studio, and we knew that it's had some amateurish aspects to it, but we felt like the songs were strong, and we were excited about some of the creative flourishes, I guess. And I guess we just kind of assumed that Fat would be up for something weird from us, and they weren't, and we were disappointed and kind of didn't know what to do. So we back then it was not like, well, I'm going to upload it to Dropbox, and we literally put the album on a CD and mailed it to Fat Mike, and then waited. It was like this like very heavy silence, because we were like, okay, we knew it's kind of weird, kind of different, and we haven't heard from him. And then I think like 2 or 3 months later, he called. Somehow he got my number.
2 or 3 months later?
Yeah. And I don't mean to sound negative.
No, you're not. You're just telling exactly what happened.
Probably, yeah. Like, I don't know. I remember us thinking like, okay, should we email them to see like what happened? Did they not get it? It was, I don't know. I mean, all the details I don't remember. I just remember us feeling like, ooh, we're sort of like, we put that out there and we don't know what anyone thinks about it. Basically, after a couple of months, Mike called me, and he made some points that looking back, made a lot of sense, but it was hard to hear. And so he was like, all right, you guys don't tour at all. There's no getting around the fact that that is something that helps the label when the bands support their releases, right? So he pointed that out, and then he was like, I think he didn't really care for the way it sounded, like sonically. I don't remember his exact wording, but we got the feeling that he didn't love the sound of it, and he wasn't really digging all the kind of weird creative touches. And so he said that the office had a vote, and they decided that they wanted to pass on it. So we were like, it hurt our feelings. We were kind of sad, disappointed, because we were really excited about it. And having been, like I said, if everything went the way that we expected it to, we would have been happy to just be on Fat for as long as we were making records. Partially because we liked working with them. We liked a lot of the bands. We were obviously fans of Mike's music too. So it would have been easy to just stick with them. But then we were thrown this wrench where we had our like egos bruised because this album that we worked really hard on making was not received well by the person that we really hoped would be into it. We didn't really know, like, we didn't have a manager or anything. We weren't active enough to have any, like, a team helping us. So we just sort of like started looking for other labels that might be interested. Ben Harper, who was in Yellow Card, had this label, Takeover, and he was a longtime fan of Bracket. I sent it to him, and he was excited to put it out. So luckily we got it out there with them. Yeah, so that brought us to 2006. I don't think we played live until maybe 2010.
Holy shit.
We really weren't doing. So Ray lived in Colorado. We made the decision that this band is not so active that we need to like sever ties with this union that we had from the time they were kids. The four of them were in, I think, junior high or high school playing music together. So Bracket is like a family. It was like, I mean, I got kind of grandfathered in or younger cousined in, but other than that, it was not, the idea of replacing Ray so that we could be active around here was not considered. So we were just okay with continuing to write music if that's the direction that we went in, and playing every once in a while if we felt like we wanted to, get that figured out with it being a long distance thing.
I find that funny that your last album before Requiem was Live in a Dive, where it's a live album, and then you guys are like, okay, cool, you really won't be able to hear that. So
yeah, right. Well, we can frame it as, you're probably never going to hear this, so you should probably check out the live album.
Yeah.
I wish we had the forethought to market it that way, because but honestly, I think most people that reach out these days, that seems to be the album that people identify with. I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe it's that it includes some of the earlier Bracket songs that are not as readily available and people like that kind of earlier sound. Or if it's just a decent collection of songs, I don't know. But I've never been a big fan of live albums. I mean, there's very few that
I can't stand them.
Yeah, it's always like, I would just so much rather either see the band for real or listen to a much better sounding representation. But we still get a lot of people reaching out about the fact that Live in a Dive is good.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. What was the crowd's reception of you guys when you recorded that album? And also, before you went into it, were you kind of nervous?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it was there was not a lot, but there were some steps taken to sort of set it up that it was going to be a live album. I remember Mike sending us like a suggested set list. Like, a lot of the songs that we played for Live in a Dive were not a lot of them. Maybe half of the songs were not ones that we typically played at that time. There were definitely some Mike requests from earlier in our catalog. And maybe, now that I'm saying it out loud, maybe that was intentional, because our first two albums that were on Caroline Records were long out of print even by then. Maybe it was a in his mind, it was a way to shed some light on the songs that got his attention in those old days. Because I'm pretty sure that was the period of time where Mike was telling people we were his favorite band. Was like, I think the second record, Four Wheel Vibe, was one that he really, I might be wrong, but from what I remember, that was the album that he talked about a lot pre-signing us.
You got to think too, from a business standpoint, I think I would love to know what goes on in Fat Mike's head, because I think he's a fucking genius, because he's so doesn't give a fuck. But every time I have these conversations with people about being on Fat, he's so laser focused on his business decisions, and they're really smart. I almost think, and this is a guess, I can't base this on anything, but him doing that and you saying that he's pulling from these songs that were early releases that weren't available, it almost makes the value of the live album more value, brings up the value of the live album, because that would be the only spot you could probably get those songs then.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if I just don't remember or wasn't a part of some of the conversation, but no, I mean, I would not be surprised if he intentionally did that, whether it's because he just liked those songs more than whatever we may have been wanting to play, or because he knew they were out of print and people could be exposed to some of our earlier songs that he really liked. And we still at that point were playing some songs from those first two records. I remember there being a few that he suggested and we were like, oh, we've never really played that live, and still doing it because he really wanted it. Like Huge Balloon, I think, was not ever in our set until it wasn't like mandated, but he strongly suggested a bunch of songs, and then we had some that we worked in also. And I don't remember if it was that time or maybe a little bit after, but at some point he was trying to reclaim the rights to those first two records from it was Virgin Records, but then at that point Virgin was Universal, I think. He had someone reach out to find out what it would, if he could like buy those and re-release them on Fat. Whatever the answer he got, it was too much money, which is so stupid. I mean, those two albums are just like languishing in non-existence. But
probably just like YouTube heaven right now, because that's where albums go.
Yeah, we don't know. Maybe we're just not business savvy enough. But even after Mike tried to look into it and determined that they wanted too much money for the masters, we've tried to sort of look into what we could do to re-release those. We get a lot of requests about that, like, why aren't those first two records on Spotify, or why aren't they on vinyl? I don't know if we're just not talking to the right people, but it's really hard to figure out what to do with that. I think a lot of people are fond of those.
I wonder if like someone who hears this, there's some people in the music industry who listen to this podcast. I wonder if there's like anyone out there who's going to listen to this and would reach out to you and say, hey, I know. That'd be pretty cool if that happens.
Hey, I'm glad you said that. So whoever just heard that and thought, hey, I know. Yeah, get in touch. We've kind of tried a couple of times and then given up. And that just might be that's our level of effort that we're willing to put out, like almost try and then give up. But we're willing to almost try again if anyone has any advice on that.
What was another thing? You said you took some steps to make sure the Live in a Dive went well. Like, what were some other things you guys did?
Oh, I guess just knowing that we were not just playing another show at the bottom of the hill, which was one of our favorite places to play at that time. Like we always had good shows there. And it sounded good on stage, which was always a plus. And it's just one of the venues that we enjoyed playing. Nailing down the set list and working in songs that we didn't typically play was definitely preparation, and just practicing for not just playing for a group of people that came to see us, but knowing that Ryan Green was going to be engineering it from wherever he was. I think they had I don't remember. I feel like I remember there was like a mobile studio, which is very common these days, but that was like 20 years ago. And I guess just like mental preparation, because we're just, I don't know, we've always been very self-aware and self-deprecating, even if that's not the best thing to be. And not taking ourselves very seriously in any way. So it's like another level to be, for us at least, to play a show knowing that this is going to be immortalized for a record, and just any dumb awkward comment any of us make is just there. yeah, we tend to overthink everything. So it was just like putting the magnifying glass on some of the things that we always probably overthought. Other than that, no, it was just like making sure that I don't know if this says it on I don't remember if there's notes on the record, like what the situation was, but the live album was actually the show was us opening for Tilt. So maybe that's not a great thing to advertise that our live record, we were the warm-up band, but
that's such random cool information though. Like that.
I can't remember, there was someone else played that night. Like I think we might have been in the middle. I think we had an opener and then it was us and then Tilt.
Did they do anything to like vet the crowd though? I mean, I always thought the live albums were you're the only band playing, but in this sense, because I was thinking, would there be something they would do to like create a crowd that would work well in your favor for that album? But it sounds like they just had a regular show.
Yeah, from what I know, the only thing was I mean, I can't even remember, but I'm assuming that because it was in San Francisco, that at least some of the folks that worked at the Fat Records office were there. So they probably were like, let's go out there and bring friends or whatever. Honestly, I don't really remember. And I don't know. I don't think it was any special. Maybe they turned away people that didn't like us. Probably not, though.
Yeah, but it's such a gamble if someone's there and you're doing this live recording. They're like, who the fuck is this band? You're like, shit.
The good thing is you can't see middle fingers on a live record. So even if people were flipping us off, you'll know.
Did that happen at the show?
No, not that show.
Oh,
no,
okay.
I still, obviously that one experience of people telling us, to fuck off made a mark on me. But that was not for our live record, no.
That's so brutal. I don't think I've ever I witnessed that one time. This crowd was just a pain in the ass, and we just started fucking back with them. This is all like a Legion Hall show, but it's like, why are you? I mean, granted, you're sometimes you're just wedged in between other bands. So you're like, okay, I get you're the crowd, but if they're there, it's like, why are you going to be an asshole? I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're not. You find it awkward to mosh to our mostly mid-tempo songs, but.
I want to jump into some of the questions that Josh had, because I had mentioned earlier that you guys did that split with them, which is age and experience versus youth and cunning. And
even we were aged and experienced.
Yeah, because you guys were I think you guys were pointed out as the age and experience part of that equation. Were you on that? Before I jump into the other questions, like, were you on that record or was Larry on that?
No. So the songs from that, this is another like backup in the complicated history. Okay, so Bracket released 2 records on Caroline in the early and mid 90s, 924 Forestville Street. And then I think the next year was Four Wheel Vibe. And this was still before I was in the band. They went to record their 3rd album with the intent of messing around with the instrumentation a little bit. So even then, 95 or 96, they were not keen on just remaining a poppy punk band. Like there were definitely musical influences that were pushing to come out. So so Bracket recorded their 3rd record with and had some session musicians come in to do like piano and some strings, and some of the songs were, I don't know if you've heard all of those songs. It ended up becoming a record called Like You Know. It was set to be released on Caroline Records, and then before it was released, for lack of a better understanding of how to explain it, I guess the label was decidedly shifted focus away from alternative and punk rock music and became primarily a electronica label, and shelved Bracket's 3rd album. Some promo CD copies were pressed, and I think because they had started, it was very close to like being released, and then it was just like halted. Bracket was dropped from Caroline Records with an album that was finished, and Fat Mike was a fan at that point and signed the band like the next day or something. It was like absolutely scooped us up. Again, not me, but us, Bracket. He decided that the first release he was going to do with Bracket before a studio album was he picked the songs that he really liked from Like You Know, the unreleased Caroline album, slapped on all of the random 7-inch tracks that Bracket had. Yeah, I didn't explain that, but while Bracket was on Caroline, they also released a few 7-inch records with Fat Records.
Okay.
So Mike was familiar with the band, a fan of Bracket, and somehow we had worked out our label being okay with us releasing songs here and there on this indie label from San Francisco. When we were dropped, he signed us officially. And so the first release was the songs that he liked from Like You Know, or that he wanted to release from Like You Know, and all the songs that he had compiled from the 7 inches. So that one is called E is for Everything on Fat. And that has parts of our third album with, again, those songs that were on the 7 inches, like 2 Rack, or 2RAK005, which is still, this many years later, really the only song that anyone knows by us. But
yeah, 1.7 million views on Spotify.
Yeah, it's funny, but
well, they were on that was on a comp, but you guys also did a video for that. I thought that was on one of the Fat video comps.
Yeah, they did that, and it was also on the first Fat comp, Fat Music for Fat People. But then it was not on an official full-length Bracket release until he signed us and he put out that compilation of our songs. So then the Humble Beginnings split. I'm pretty sure I got this right. The rest of the songs that Mike didn't put on E is for Everything.
Oh, shit. Okay.
So it's like the other half of Like You Know, the songs that he didn't choose to release at that time. Yeah, so they were, I don't want to say leftovers, but they were left over from the third album and didn't see the light of day until that split with Humble Beginnings. And I really know very little about how we hooked up with them, but maybe he knows. Josh, you said?
I mean, it's on 2 Records. So Andrew Courtney, who was the owner of that label, it was a ska label. This was his 12th release on that record label. And I remember when this was happening, this is all vague, but Josh was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. We're going to have this split with Bracket." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. It's like one of your favorite bands." And then Andrew put it on his label. So I remember all that happening. I don't remember how it happened, but obviously it did. So, I mean, maybe like Josh reached out to you guys, or he was dating someone at the time and she had this zine called Annoying Girl.
Oh, yeah.
Celli.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I think she had some involvement, maybe and asked or something like that. Because I remember she was really good friends. I think she was really good friends with one of the guys in your band. Like, I think she was really good friends with Marty.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I remember Annoying Girl. Like, I almost feel like that may have been just before I was in the band, but I had an awareness of it because, there's this zine that talks about Bracket and likes Bracket, or I don't remember exactly, but however that all worked out, we were lucky to have the rest of the songs from that release out there. And it wasn't until, I don't know, a few years ago we were able to release that record. The original incarnation of Like You Know was released on vinyl finally by Spam Records from Austria.
Is that the best of the worst?
No, he also released, same label, released Like You Know. So it's the songs from the Humble Beginnings split and the songs that Fat Mike took for E is for Everything. We put them back together as originally intended. And I think it's on Spotify, and I'm not sure if there's any vinyl left. But that was released finally a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah, it's on Spotify, Like You Know.
Yes. We'll recognize some of the songs from, or you may or may not. So like I would say, I don't know, half of the songs were on our first Fat release and the other half were on that split that you're talking about.
These questions are kind of all over the place, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer them, but I'm just going to ask them anyway. He goes, the first one is, you guys are known for your unique songwriting style. Has Marty, who's the singer-songwriter, ever written a song with just 4 chords that repeat? I would like to hear what happens when he's limited to G, D, E minor, and C. It sounds like he was a very complex songwriter.
Yeah, I don't know. I bet if I had Marty here, he would find a song that he's written to pick apart and point out how simple it is. But he's not here. And off the top of my head, I would look to either the first record or maybe, one of the first 2 records I think may have just been a little less complex songwriting wise. From there on out, mostly our songs are, yeah, Marty as a songwriter definitely was inspired by using chords that weren't typically used in punk song structures, I guess, or at least chord progressions. Okay, so this is sort of like a trick answer. The album that we released, I think it was in 2016, called The Last Page. It's one song and it's 70 minutes, but it's really like 90 something short songs that we wove together.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's just such a fantastic idea, right?
I mean, it's like the decline kind of.
Yeah, it's like a really long decline. We really wanted to call it the Recline, but we didn't know if Mike would like that.
Well, I mean, they just released an album called Surfer, which has the Bad Religion Suffer thing, you know, so.
We could have gotten away with it. Technically, that is a lot of songs that are strung together, like The Decline or like Side B of Abbey Road. Like they're kind of like, they sort of weave together, but they also could stand alone. There are definitely some chunks of songs there that have a more traditional or less than 4-chord structure. But then again, it's sandwiched between a bunch of other stuff. So
technically no.
Yeah, I guess not. I don't know, but maybe a few songs from the first album had some less unexpected chord changes and progressions.
So his other one was the verses for Trailer Park is one of my top 10 all-time favorite melodies. So much so that I'm disappointed when the chorus comes in. Have you heard similar feedback from others?
That's funny. It's funny to be disappointed when the chorus hits. No, I've never heard that specific feedback, but as cheesy as it sounds, I actually personally had a similar take on it when, not that I didn't like the chorus, but again, when I first heard that song, I was not in the band. I was a follower of their band, and I really liked what they came up with. And I remember hearing Trailer Park and thinking along those lines, like there was something about the vocal melody in the verse that really, really stood out. And it's not that it's like the most complex melody, but there's something to it, and I can't put my finger on it, but I've always felt that. Not that I was disappointed when the chorus came on, but it is, yeah, I don't know. I always thought that was a really strong, different kind of melody in that type of song. I almost had maybe it was a really early hint of our Beach Boys influence that really got like out of control later.
That's interesting. That makes sense because he loved the Beach Boys. I don't know if he loves them still, but he used to love the Beach Boys back then.
We definitely got into more Beach Boys influences in our later records, but there's something about that melody that kind of, I don't know if it's just like the way that the words are sung. I kind of know what he's getting at, but no, I've never heard that.
Yeah, I have to go. Anyone listening, it's number 1 on the Live in a Dive. It's the first song. I don't think I've heard that. I'm going to go listen to that after this just to hear what this is all about. Because I love a good melody, especially I love a verse with a good melody. It's like one of my favorite things.
Just don't be too disappointed when the chorus comes around.
Yeah, apparently I'm going to hate it. So this one, I don't know. When he said this, I was like, this is interesting. He goes, who's a better songwriter, Phil from Limp or Dave from Diesel Boy? This is going to be a funny answer because they were always in competition.
I don't know.
What's the mean about you guys were in competition?
I don't know exactly. Okay, so Diesel Boy was from Santa Rosa, which is technically speaking is a different town, but is very much like we all were from the Forestville, and Santa Rosa is like, I don't know, 10 miles away from Forestville in like West Sonoma County. I guess we were if you zoom out, we're from the same area and kind of around the same time period, being, trying to get into the same scene. But we also, I don't know, we used to play a lot of shows together, kind of came up at the same time from the same area. I don't know how much competition there really was. But we played a lot of shows with them, and we ended up on the same label. And then with Limp, we also used to play a lot with them, and they were, from what I remember, I think Phil from Limp gave Marty a demo, and Marty passed it on to Mike, and that is how they got signed to what was, technically it was Fat Records, but was Honest Don's.
Which is also what Diesel Boy was on.
Exactly, yeah. And I I don't know if Brackett was involved in getting Diesel Boy signed. I actually don't think so. But I would say those three bands kind of ran around the same circles for many years in those like mid to late 90s. So maybe not competition. I do remember there was a local like music zine from Santa Rosa called Section M. And at one point they did an interview. They did an interview where they had both Brackett and Diesel Boy do it together. And we did we did a photo shoot where we dressed up like opposing football teams. It sounds so goofy now, but I don't remember much else from that. So who's a better songwriter? I think they both brought their unique take on pop punk, because what I would say is Brackett, Diesel Boy, and Limp all, like I said, were sort of part of the same scene, ended up on the same label, and I think all sounded pretty different from each other. I don't know. I haven't heard from Phil in a really long time. I don't know if he's on social media or anything, but Serge from Limp, I got to see recently. He's playing in a band called Year of the Fist, and the new band that I'm playing in played a show with them. So that was fun. We were catching up on the old Brackett and Limp times from years past.
Just remembering all that competition from back then.
All the competition, yeah. Talking about who was the worst songwriter. Yeah, I don't know. I no comment.
What was the guy who was in Year of the Fist? Because I've been trying to interview someone from Limp for a while.
Oh, yeah, he is a great guy. He's hilarious and would be a wonderful guest.
What was his name?
His name is Serge, Serge. He has a long Russian name, and I don't remember how to say it. Yeah, he plays bass in Year of the Fist, and he just started a pop punk band with his significant other called Beneath You, and they just released an EP like a couple weeks ago. So you should definitely get in touch with him. I'm sure he'd love to talk about old times and new stuff.
So the last one, and before I start wrapping this up, he thought you guys were on Beavis and Butthead and said no, you weren't. You actually had a video on 120 minutes. Which one's accurate?
Both, kind of.
You were on Beavis and Butthead?
Well, I think what I remember it being was, oh shit, maybe I'm remembering this wrong. I'm going to have to do research on Beavis and Butthead. But we were on, yes, Trailer Park. The video for Trailer Park was on 120 minutes. I thought there was something Beavis and Butthead related, but I can't put my finger on it. I do remember there being this is another MTV thing. There was a commercial for The Real World, and they cut in one of our songs in the background or something. And maybe that's why I'm thinking Beavis and Butthead, but I don't know. Shoot, I'm going to have to do some, you ever do like follow up the erroneous facts that were put on your podcast?
There was a story that someone said about Blue Meanies, and the person, I forget who it was, they said they walked by the dressing room, the Blue Meanies were tearing out Bible pages and eating them. And I asked Billy, who was the singer, and he was like, I don't know, let me ask my guitar player. So then on Twitter, the guitar player replied and like just told the whole story. And I just took like a screenshot and put it on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I find out more, I'll message you, and if you have like, or if you find the answer, just message me and I'll just do that.
Yeah, it's like bringing up something, but I can't remember. We were on Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen straight to DVD movie. Not us personally, but funny enough, the song that Mike co-wrote for When All Else Fails, No Brainer, it plays in the background of, I think, like a little volleyball challenge game that happens, and it was funny to hear that.
Those are like the DVDs that made them billionaires, right?
Yeah, not us, but them for sure. Yeah, it's just funny, those little things that stick out, that you when you are happy to lend your music out to anybody that wants to put it in the background, you tend to remember everything. So the Beavis and Butthead thing is why it's nagging at me, because I'm like, I feel like I would know for sure whether or not, but maybe it was just before I was in the band too, which is something that I don't have all the facts straight. Yeah, so basically from 2006 when Requiem was released to today, we've really just become primarily a studio band, not even studio, but recording at home band when we get around to it. We play like once every 3 or 4 years or so. I think our last show was just like a month before COVID became a real big thing. It was supposed to be our record release show that was a year after the record came out.
Oh, wow.
That's in true bracket fashion. We were just a year late. But those were two really fun shows that we played, and that was the last thing we've done. We released Hold Your Applause in 2014, thanks, which was the biggest gap of time. And you don't even have the time to go into why we just sat around for that many years and didn't do much. But the short story is we found out that the studio that we built in the trailer did not have the correct permits to exist. And it was so old that it couldn't move. We couldn't move it without it like crumbling. So we had to dismantle it, and it was demolished. So our 2 years of work building that were wasted. I guess you could say they're not, because we created an album that we still are fond of. At that point, we kind of went even further into hibernation mode, because it was just like depressing and upsetting to have that kind of a setback. And then a few years later, we started trying to take that stuff out of all the equipment that we had to put into storage. Marty and his wife graciously let us set up the necessary equipment to start messing with new music in their living room. And that's how we recorded Hold Your Applause. And then the last page, which was the 70-minute song.
The Recline,
which is probably, it's actually a very divisive record, even within our band. Pretty sure Marty and I think that's the best thing we've ever done, and Zach and Ray maybe don't think that. And it's not like we're not like fighting about it, but I know that someone has asked us before, and Marty and I have both responded that that's the thing that we're most proud of. And I don't know, it's definitely a polarizing thing to try to do that. And, and I think in Zach's opinion, it probably there are some really good, strong songs and melodies that he probably sees would have been, and a lot of people have shared this same feeling, that they would have been better represented and better received had they been separate songs. But we latched onto the idea of doing it because it was such a almost insurmountable task that was exciting and challenging. So
yeah, it's wild. It's on Spotify and it says single 2020. I guess that's just when it was uploaded, or however they put the date on there. But it's like an hour 10 and 13 seconds.
Yeah,
one song.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was the best idea to take those, what I think are probably some of the best songs Marty has written, and hide them within this big, massive, hard to digest thing. But also we committed to that idea because it was a fun challenge. And so we stuck with it. There are people that really appreciate it, and there are people that really wish we would have just either picked a few of those songs and made a proper album out of the best bits, or at least separated them so you could flip to your favorite parts. But it is what it is. And then anybody that suffered through it got the reward of having a pretty straightforward pop punk album. The next one that came out, Too Old to Die Young, and that's the last thing that we've done. And it was so straightforward that Fat Mike was happy to release it. So it full circle.
Yeah, it goes back on Fat Records, and that's also that video I wanted to ask you about. But how did you just send it to Mike on a whim, or is he always asking to hear your new releases before they go out?
I think that he continued to be interested in what we were doing, even if he didn't see it fitting in with Fat, which I can understand that. After we got over the hurt of that, I understood, I guess. But we remained in touch here and there, and I think he always was interested to hear what we were doing. And then this actually came about when we were in the middle of recording the last page, the long song album, and Fat reached out to ask if we would play the at least one of the 25th anniversary shows. They did a big tour, or multiple tours maybe, of celebrating Fat Records 25 years as a label. Part of that was reaching out to bands that had been part of the sort of formative years of the label. And even though they knew we were pretty inactive at that point, at least playing live wise, they asked us to play, and we thought it would be a good move on our part to do that, because they did play a big role in giving us a home when it seemed like all was lost when Caroline Records got rid of us. So we played a show in San Francisco when the tour came to San Francisco, which is fairly close to where we live. We played that, and it was actually a lot of fun. It was the first time we played in a number of years. We had a great time and got a really good response, which was something that we were always like, as we talked about earlier this morning, it was always something that we were unsure of when we were playing with bands that sounded very little like us. It was a fun show. It almost felt like people had, in the years that we had been dormant, it seemed a little more open to embracing us and remembering us more fondly than we thought, I guess. Mike had a great time, and he approached us afterwards, and he said basically something like, I love all the weird shit you've been doing, like all the weird albums, but you should do another record with Fat. Let's just make it a little more punky. Like, basically, would you guys be interested in doing a record with us and kind of like tamping down some of the experimentation or whatever? We were in the middle of making our weirdest album ever at that point. So we were like, well, we'll talk to you when we're done with that one. And so when we finished the last page, we talked about, like, would that be something that we'd be interested in doing? And at that point, it seemed almost like a welcome challenge to kind of like try to hone in on simplifying our songs a little bit, like go in the other direction, because we were for so many years, we were so focused on pushing ourselves to like, ooh, let's try these really complex harmonies or these very unexpected chord progressions. And the idea of trying to like fight against those urges, I guess, was something that seemed fun. And it seemed like it could be a fun kind of full circle thing to like, let's try to make a record that Bracket would be happy with at this time in our career that might please some of the people that miss the way that some of the aspects of the way that we sounded earlier in our career as a band.
What were your thoughts of after like the final? I'm looking at the downloads. You've got one song that's got 158,000 downloads.
Yeah, well, I guess some people liked it. That's good. No, it was fun to make. It was rewarding to put ourselves into trying to figure out like how would we want this period Bracket record to sound if we're trying to make it a little more straightforward. And I think we achieved that. Like we didn't abandon everything that we had that we had done in our later period, I guess, but I think that we did find a way to make the songs a little more direct. And then when we finished it, we still thought like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to send it to Mike, and he's going to say like, yeah, no thanks. But he loved it. And so that was exciting. And it was fun to kind of do this like back to Fat Records victory lap. Then we ended up only playing 2 shows to support it. But but that was COVID's fault. We might have done some things. Who knows? In retrospect, I wouldn't say that it's my favorite release we've ever done, but I do like it a lot. And I think that it was a fun record to make, and it was fun to work with them again.
I mean, if you go by like just the download numbers, it's impressive, because if I go a few albums leading up to it, they're not as big, they're not nothing to scoff at, but like the previous one, it kind of averages between like 4 to like 7,000 per song, on average. And then you go back to the really old ones like Live and a Dive, those numbers are pretty big. So it's like in this one, I mean, you've got like 48,000, 97,000, 158,000, 18,000, 20,000, 91,000. So it's to have an album come out so much later on and have that much response, that seems pretty cool.
Oh yeah. No, it was that whole experience was fun and rewarding and exciting in a different way than what we had. It was almost like the 3 records at least 2 records previous, we were self-releasing them, which was expensive and without a lot of return. While we were doing things that we were really excited about, it was really hard we didn't know how to promote ourselves. We didn't really put a lot of effort into doing that. And so when Too Old to Die Young came around, and we were working with Fat Records that had a team behind helping, secure interviews and like promoting and things, these were all things that we hadn't gotten to experience for like, you know, like 18 years or something. And it was fun to see. Like, I couldn't tell you how many people we had reaching out to us or commenting on some of the posts leading up to and around that time was released, that most people just had no idea that we were a band still. Like, I think they had no idea we had material that we'd been putting out every few years from the time we were like more active with Fat Records. So it was funny. Like, a lot of people were like, "Oh, Bracket, I thought you guys broke up years ago." It was sort of a way for people to find out that we actually have been still around, not coming to your town anytime soon, but we've been continuing to create music. And it was a fun experience to see. It almost felt like, kind of like I was saying about the Fat record, the 25th anniversary thing. It felt like there were some people that were more open to our band than maybe they were. Maybe it just felt that way, but it felt like things were a little more, like maybe the history of our band was a little more fondly remembered than maybe it felt like when we were experiencing it the first time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. Which is kind of funny because the record itself, and then you have this video that I want to talk about, this stop animation thing. It kind of seems like there's this feeling of like a rejuvenation happening.
Yeah, it's like rejuvenation, and also, you know, if you really look at a lot of the lyrical themes of the album, well, I mean, I'll be honest, like, lyrics have never been the primary focus of our music. Not that they're not important. Like, bad lyrics can be pretty hard to digest, even if a song is great. But obviously, whether we were trying to be serious or not, a lot of the themes that came up in these songs are like, you know, sort of like disappointment, disillusionment with being creative and not feeling like you're getting, I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly how to put it, but it definitely comes off, if you read the lyrics, a lot of it comes off as like a cynical, grumpy old band trying to enjoy what they're doing and still feeling sort of some disillusionment from putting so much time and effort into. And that can also be seen just as like, not as specifically talking about music, but just kind of like a growing up, not kind of knowing where you stand kind of thing. And that's kind of how we felt as a band always. So it was, yeah, nothing was meant to be super specific, but like, forget the video, you know, obviously the monster action figure guys are like feeling nervous about playing. And, you know, some of those themes were obviously apparent to the guy that was making the video for us, because those were not our voices. He overdubbed all of them.
Oh, I was gonna ask that.
Yeah.
There's one part. Hold on, I gotta play it real fast. It's like 1, 2, 3, Bracket, punk rock, yay! I started dying. But yeah, when it's playing, it's so funny because, I mean, it's so creative, and I mean, there's only so much you can really do with just arm movement. And this, like, the Dracula looks like he's like, it's kind of like he's reverse jerking off.
Yeah, we debated whether or not to ask him to, or maybe he was the guy that did the video was asking if he could basically make an elbow, so have a little more movement. And then we ended up deciding it would just kind of, it might have made his job either more complicated or less work. I don't know. It definitely made it look funny.
Oh, it's hilarious. I mean, there's like points where Frankenstein's arm is off frame, and then and then the drummer the whole time. It's hilarious because the way he's set up, it's like it's the Phantom of the Opera, I think. Yeah, and he's playing with the sticks, but he just, like, his head's moving back and forth, kind of looking like, what am I doing? Like, he's confused with the sticks.
Yeah, we were very happy with how that came out, and it was clearly we were not interested in shooting a typical video where we're like lip syncing to our music or whatever. We had no interest in being on camera at this point. And the album cover was just a picture that I had taken of a couple of those little action figure guys were toys that I had as a kid. I was at my parents' house and I found them, and I was, for no reason at all, I wasn't like, ooh, this looks like a good artsy album cover. Just taking pictures of them because I don't know, I just liked the way they looked, and it was just kind of a funny thing to get a picture of. And when we were looking for album cover art, I don't remember if it was Marty or Zach that said, what about those pictures of Dracula and Wolfman? So Fat liked that, and they took that and made the album cover. And then when we were talking to, so this guy's name is Mike Sloat. He's a local guy to us, and he had reached out asking about working on a video at some point, and we asked him about, so the conversation turned to stop motion animation, and then we were thinking like, oh, what if we use the guys from the album cover? Then we had to go on eBay and find 2 more matching figures, because I only had Dracula and Wolfman, so we got Frankenstein. Who was it? The Phantom of the Opera? I can't remember.
Yeah.
And then he got to work, and yeah, no, I love it. It's funny. It matches the album cover, and I was obsessed with that. I mean, I love horror movies in general, but when I was a little kid, I was all about those early monster movies.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, it did really well too on YouTube. There's a lot of views on it and stuff. Not like, I mean, I'm saying all these numbers as if that's like the success, but when there's a lot of people paying attention, there's some really good comments too.
I don't even know how to measure success anymore, and that's fine. but yeah, views are good. Yeah,
I mean, it just kind of shows like people showed up. I think it's just me because I've just done videos for so long, like just creating shit for Instagram and stuff. And, I'll put something up and it's got like, this has, it's a reel. It's like, this has 100 views. I'm like, oh, and it's like, this one has 5,000. I'm like, yes. And like, I'm not seeing any money from this. And no one's really like reaching out to me and wanting to do something. But I just like, oh, wow, enough people like felt that they should watch this. I mean, that's really all you can get out of it. You can't, there's no monetary thing in that.
It definitely, Fat Records has the ability to, I'm not saying that people listen to this record or watch these videos because, oh, it's Fat Records, so I better watch it. But I think that it called attention to the fact that we were making new music and even a new video at a time where most people that remembered us figured we were long gone. So I think it was helpful to kind of bring us back into some people's awareness. Helpful for what reason? I mean, it's rewarding to know that more people heard this music, the most current music that we've created at this point, at a time where we've been a band for so long and had been pretty under the radar for a long time. So it was fun to do, and these songs too were fun to play. We did only play 2 shows with a lot of those songs in the set, but they translated well to playing live. Certainly a smoother transition from record to stage than some of the stuff that we were doing in the late 2000s leading up to that. A lot of stuff we couldn't recreate with just the 4 of us from like Hold Your Applause and Requiem and The Last Page. So it was fun to have a record where there was a little bit of push and attention behind it, and also some songs that were relatively easy or doable to play live,
Yeah.
sound close to the record.
Cool, man. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. 2 questions, one before the last one, obviously. What would you like to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend, it could be about both.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll just say that don't completely forget about Bracket. We try to post things to show people we're still around every once in a while. Usually it's those shameless, like, oh, this album came out 48 years ago or whatever. Not really that old, but we plan on at some point doing some new stuff, and there's no timeline on it. We're first and foremost, a family and friends, and we also have personal lives that keep us busy. So when the time is right, we do have a bunch of songs that we've got some ideas for. And so, we'll see where that goes. For the currently, Zach, our bass player, is, check out the band that he's playing with. They're called Here Comes the Comet. It was a few years ago. Marty released some solo stuff that if that flew under anybody's radar, after you check out all the forgotten late period Bracket albums, feel free to check out Marty Grigori. He's got a solo album where the first 4 songs are actually a string quartet, 4 movement, full-on string quartet, and then he's got some other cool solo music on that album. Very far from Bracket, but with the same melodic sense. So check that out. And I play in a band called Guilty Party, and we're based in Oakland. And we're kind of like, if you like Bracket, you would like us. We have, it's me and 2 members of another fat band called Toy Guitar. We just put out an EP, so check out Guilty Party if you feel so inclined.
Well, and what's the name of your brewery again you work for?
Oh, I work for Hen House Brewing Company. So if you're in, you can get it kind of in a lot of places in like the North Bay for sure, but ever in Sonoma County or the Bay Area, check it out. Delicious fresh beer.
Do you guys ship? Do you guys can? Yeah, actually, no, you do can beer. Do you guys ship across the country to like bottle shops?
Few and far between. We work with some distributors that take it further than we could do it ourselves, but it's mostly just a regional brewery. But
There's a bunch of bottle shops here, and they carry shit from all over the place. And there's my favorite one's called Tasty Beverages. It's right in downtown Raleigh, and they carry probably the best selection of beer in town. And they are so I don't know if you're ever looking, you just reach out to Johnny on their Instagram if you were looking to send any cans or to sell anything, and just tell him that Doyle told you to contact them. He might buy some stuff if you were going to do that.
yeah, I'll put that out to the folks that make those decisions. I know we do like a once a year a big drop. We distribute like I think once a year to Portland. Other than that, I think the company is just kind of focusing on growth in our home, not spreading out from our home territory where we are very doing very well and well known, but kind of like pushing the boundaries of still being local, but trying to get out there too. We were a self-distributed brewery up until like a few months ago, so it's a kind of like new territory having it other people responsible for getting it out there in the world, because we have a lot of standards about cold storage, and make sure that you keep your beer cold, especially hop forward beers. So Hen House is a real big proponent of making quality beer, and then knowing how and talking a lot about how you care for beer, because it does make a difference. So if it's making sure that it's cold stored from the time that it's canned or kegged through when it's being tapped or consumed is your best bet for having brewery fresh, delicious beer.
That works. All right. So last question: what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
I think we have, in this very long career, even though it's been scattered, kind of scattershot, how often we'd get out there and play with other people. We have played with so many different bands and different styles, different interpretations of what you might be able to call punk rock or alternative music, that the common theme was it's just fun to play with other people that are passionate about their music. I could probably only think of one or two instances where there was ever any sort of disrespect or friction from anybody that we ever came across. And that is so few and far between, that being respectful of each other's, creative paths, just a mutual respect, both with the people that came out to see us and the bands that we play with. I mean, we played with like metal bands, we played with hardcore bands, and luckily the last two shows that we played, whether they're the last shows we ever play or not, I don't know, but we got to play with bands that we were fans of. So that was a great way to, if it's how we go out, it was a nice way to cap it, because we kind of like handpicked who we asked to play with us, and luckily they were mostly available. So yeah, I don't know, mutual respect.